This isn't about sanctions or warfare. This is about control over your food. The Great Famine is upon us, and during this episode, I will prove to you that these occurrences are not that odd, and it is coordinated plan attack against our freedoms. Welcome to the Great Famine.
We talk about food shortages, and it's going to be real. The price of these sanctions is not just imposed upon Russia; it's imposed upon an awful lot of countries as well, including European countries and our country as well.
As we sleep, work, and live around us, we are collapsing. The food chain is collapsing, and all that's left in the rubble is a hungry belly, an empty mind, and slavery. Well, they will dictate what we eat, how we eat, and when we eat. Before you is a list of all that has burned down in the last 12 to 15 months. The list is endless. The consequences are great. I am here on Bastion, a decentralized network based in freedom to speak to the masses and open your mind to be prepared for what is coming. It is the Great Famine. It is American communism. It is here, and it is ready to claim you. We have an amazing episode prepared tonight. As always, I have my special guest, the beautiful Modest, who is joining us. Hey, Marco, can you hear us?
Yes, sir, I can.
All right, he's joining us via Skype. So what we're actually going to go over today isn't just the 17, 18 food plant distribution centers that have burned down. We're going to go a little more in depth and show how there is an attack on the food pyramid itself. So, guys, I appreciate y'all joining me today. First off, how are you doing today, Modest?
I'm good. A little tired, but I'm good.
It's been an exciting day. Marco Polo, how are you today?
I'm just grateful to be here. Thank you for the opportunity.
That's wonderful. So the first thing we're going to look at, guys, is the food pyramid. It's pretty basic. You know, what do you have to have a healthy diet? You have to have your bread, cereals, potatoes, fruits and vegetables, milk, cheese, and dairy, meat, fish, and other alternatives, and of course, fats and oils. It's pretty basic idea. But what I'm going to show today isn't just the small percentage of distribution center and processing plants. We're actually going to show some of the elements that are being put on us right now through every aspect. So to grow anything, you have to have good weather conditions. To package anything, you have to have materials to pack it in. And we have to have centers to distribute it. So there's different aspects of this we're going to cover. So let's take a look at the first slide here. Right here, we're actually looking at a drought of the U.S. The dark red indicates extreme drought. The lighter red is harsh conditions, and then it goes yellow. Over 38% of the U.S. right now is going through these conditions where it's going to hurt crop production.
What about the blue and the green?
The blue and the green is more of ideal, or what you're looking for to actually produce crops.
Okay.
So there are some areas in the U.S. that are seeing some good conditions. 38% are seeing very harsh.
Okay.
Yeah, it's pretty rough. And the slide I want to show you, and this is according to the National Drought Mitigation Center. Now, this is as of March 8th, 2022. More than 10% of alfalfa hay acreage in the United States was experiencing extreme or exceptional drought conditions. Now, you guys know what alfalfa hay is used for?
That feeds the livestock, correctly?
That is correct. So we're looking at livestock, being able to feed them, keep them healthy. That puts meat on the table. And we're looking at 10% of the acreage for that is an exceptional or extreme drought. And that's actually hurting the food that is going to the distribution centers. Right now, when you Google anything about the fires in the distribution centers, you see 2 or 3 articles that say, no, it's not that big of a deal. Look the other way. But when you put all of these factors together, I think you're going to see that we are actually in a crisis and we are in big trouble. So, citing drought, the feds won't give water to California farmers. The federal government said Wednesday it won't deliver any water to California farmers because of the severe drought, a decision that will force many to plant fewer crops in the region that supplies a quarter of the nation's food. So, right now in California, they provide over a quarter of our food, our crops, and right now, because of the drought, the federal government is restricting water to those farmers. It's kind of dangerous. I think we're going to see that in the following months, because of this decision, we are going to see food supplies drop across the U.S., and it has very little to do with the fires and more to do about policy and weather conditions. I think, maybe weather modification plays into this. Maybe it's just seasonal droughts. Every so often we have droughts, but, totally it is causing a problem. As this clip it shows, and this is February 23rd of 2022, it's devastating to the horticultural economy and to those people that rely on it. This is coming from the regional director of the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. But unfortunately, we can't make it rain. That's what it says. I think there are, and I don't know if you can relate to this, Marco, and Modest, but there are ways to modify the weather to make it rain. Do you think in this situation we should be using those aspects to seed clouds and to produce rainfall for the crops? Is this unethical to do?
I think it's unethical because I've heard of, they use silver oxide where they try to seed clouds. They went up in the atmosphere and released the silver oxide particles, and it condensed the water molecules in the sky, and it created artificial clouds and made it rain. But the rain was toxic. So I rain toxic rain on the crops. But my bigger question is, are all those golf courses and the mansions and the Hamptons and stuff, are they going to cut the water off to them? How are you going to cut the water supply to the farms? And I want to see, like, if I see the golf courses with dead grass, then I'd be like, all right, we're in a real drought. But if someone's driving through Malibu or whatever, county in California, and everything looks pristine, and they shut down the food plants, I have a big issue with that. That's another scenario that, like, they're giving us a false narrative.
Right, and like maybe the mitigation of the supplies could be better. It's a policy issue. If they're letting millionaires have beautiful front yards and golf courses are in that evergreen condition, is it the most viable way when 25% of our food source comes from California? I will say this too, Marco, and I think this is interesting. I have seen methods to create clouds where they use extreme heat and they pour water onto this extreme heat and create vapor. I think there are different ways to create rainfall, and I think some are chemical based and some are like I said, you're actually creating a vapor that eventually turns to rainfall. So I would agree with you that seeding the clouds is going to make more acidic rain and be bad for crop, but possibly there are other methods, and they're right beside the ocean. Why aren't they using plants to process out the salt water, especially in a situation where they produce 25% of our food? I think that's something to be looked into. What do you think, Modest?
I don't know how that process would work.
Well, I know it's expensive and it's costly to do, but I think when they're losing so much financial opportunity with their crops not being produced, it would be something to look into. Let's pop over to our next slide. Now, this is Grimway Farms. They're actually maybe following through on a threat to leave California due to the high cost of farming in the state. Grimway leads the world in carrot production and is one of the country's top organic producer, managing over 50,000 acres of vegetables. Now, this guy, I've actually read recently that he's moving to Georgia because of the fact that the feds won't give over water. I mean, he's a carrot farmer. He manages 50,000 acres, so he's actually going to pack up and leave shop, which I think is a good thing for our food supply. But is this going to happen soon enough? Right now with everything that's going on, we are going to see a pinch in the 2024 election, 2025 beyond with food shortages, and I think this is like the overlay that we're going to experience with people fleeing. You guys have any thoughts on that?
Oh, well, definitely. Like you see in Florida and Texas, their economy booming because they're open.
Right.
And I think all the farmers that are in California, if they're going to ration their water supply and supply the golf courses, I'd definitely leave.
I would too.
Point, because you have to build that infrastructure. Like, even if you had the capital to move from one state to another and buy the land, like, you have to plant the crops. So there's going to be a little bit of lag between the transition.
Right, and that's what I'm afraid of. And this is my personal belief. I think they're going to use the starvation and the food shortages to kind of pivot toward how bad Putin is. They need a demon. They need someone to pin this policy issue on, and I think they're going to do it on the war in Ukraine. When you look at this policy of cutting off farmers' water supply while the rich have nice yards and the golf courses are beautiful, I think that's a policy issue that they're going to try to blame on a foreign war. Let's pop over to the next slide. Now, this is an interesting perspective of the food shortage. There will likely be a canned food shortage in 2022. The high prices and low availability of aluminum may cause canned food and beverages shortages this year, much like the end of 2021. This extends not just to canned foods, but also pet foods. I think everybody, if you have a pet, you're buying food at the grocery store, you can definitely tell there is an increase in price. And this is due to about a 25% jump in aluminum. Imported foods like cheeses and other foreign produced items may be in short supply due to availability, supply chain issues, and higher cost to transport goods overseas. So not only are we going to have trouble canning it here, even ordering it from foreign sources is going to be expensive, and we're probably going to see a price jump. Best solution, I think, right now is to store up as much as you can for the following year. That's something that I know Modest has been doing, is buying canned goods and storing. Is that the best method to trying to prepare for this, Modest?
I would say definitely so.
I agree. What do you think, Marco?
I would encourage people, if you have the option, if you can start a garden, that's always a great option. If you can preserve your own fruits and vegetables, that's also another option. I do believe that the aluminum shortage, tying into the canned goods shortage, that leads up to you not being able to stockpile, because those goods,
right,
they're not perishable. They last for years, right?
Right.
So if you bought them now, you could eat them 10 years later. So I think most of this stuff is manufactured. I think that the powers that be, they do problem, reaction, solution. So first they give you a problem. You're hungry, you want to eat, right? Mm-hmm. So then they give you a solution. Well, currently all the things that we were eating aren't available. So I'm concerned that, you hear Klaus Schwab say you'll owe nothing to be happy. That's a very concerning statement. He sounds like a James Bond villain. And they keep trying to push people to eat insects. You can buy cricket cornmeal. It's a cornmeal substitute, but it's made out of crickets. Now, I don't know about y'all, but I would prefer not to eat crickets. And as long as I can go to the store and get some steak and eggs, that's what I'd rather eat.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Soy boys eat bugs.
Soy boys eat bugs. That's great.
Hey, put that on a shirt.
Yeah, I think so. That'd be a good shirt.
It's gonna be a trendy thing. I think they're gonna push it for us to eat insects because it's scalable to the population growth. Per acre, you can produce more insects than you can livestock and cattle, and I think that's a shame. In a weird argument, because I think the elites, no matter what, are going to be eating exactly what they want, which will be the steaks and cattle, and then we'll actually go down in the food chain in that aspect where we'll start eating insects. And in some ways we're being primed for it. Our candies have always been kind of, and this is something just to think about, maybe not actually accurate, but a lot of the candies we eat are bug shaped. You have it's kind of like a gag. You're eating candy bugs in some way. You know what I'm talking about? Like the gummy worms, and they have like scorpions and different types of candies. And I think that's kind of priming
Well, you
us.
can't actually eat candied bugs.
Well, you can eat candy bugs, absolutely, chocolate-covered grasshoppers and ants. But I think, in essence, it is priming us a little bit for that transition. I mean, our kids might be eating bugs, and that's kind of scary. Let's pop to the next slide. Another slide about how local breweries will be producing less beer because of the price of aluminum. The price of aluminum cans has increased at a minimum of 25% since before the pandemic. So if you guys like beer,
Stockpile.
yeah, you better stockpile now, because you might not be able to get it by the end of this year.
I'm from Germany. I'd say a glass bottle tastes better anyway, so if they say beer, I'm all for it.
Yeah, we might actually have to
I
go back to
agree.
glass. I mean, what's the deal with that? Why don't we start producing glass? At this point, with a 25% increase of aluminum, you think the price for making glass bottles would balance out for supply chain issues. Now let's go back to the food pyramid. According to the U.S., Apple's recently published report that today's total number of apples in storage on February 1st of 2022 was 111.1 million bushels. This is 1.4% less than last February. So we're actually seeing a decline in our apple production, and it's 5.1% below the 5-year average for the date. So we're actually seeing over the last 5 years 5% less apples being produced. This is also going to tie into the food shortage. We're going to see less apples at the market, less canned goods via the slide we saw before, and our alfalfa is going to affect the livestock. So this is just one element of the food pyramid that's being disrupted. And if I'm not mistaken, China also produces a large number of apples, which I believe this is what it's really about. They're going to try to drop the price of all our goods and then have China pick up that 2 to 3% difference, and so they're going to make more money. Now let's pop over to bananas. It's another great fruit that we know. Banana prices are plummeting and farmers are suffering. That's the problem. So on January 12th, the Ministry of Agriculture from 7 Latino American banana producing countries came out in vocal support of banana producers, sounding the alarm over a price crunch that is taking a toll on smallholder farmers. So what we're experiencing now is, because of COVID, because of shipping costs, because of diseases like Fusarium TR4, banana producers are coming under increasing financial pressure, placing their livestock, sustainability, farming practices, and food security at risk. So if you're hoping that you're going to be able to eat apples and bananas over the next 2 to 3 years, there might be a scarcity, and this is going to contribute to the food shortage. And I love bananas. I really do enjoy a good banana. Let's pop to the next slide. Now, this is interesting, and I think this kind of shows that a lot of what we're experiencing is a policy issue, yes, but it's also a way to line the pocket of China. China produces half of the worldwide vegetables and 30% of the fruit. What's interesting about this is that they're going to pick up the slack. If we're not able to produce the fruit because of drought, supply issues, China owns the largest amount of aluminum in the world. They have it stockpiled, so they're playing roles into this. They're going to have the vegetables increase their production. They're going to have the aluminum to produce it, and we're just going to be kind of at their whim. And I think this is what the Biden administration wants.
Why? Why do they want that?
Because I think they want to deal with China and make money from deals. I mean, it's kind of the Joe Biden initiative. A lot of this money, for example, that we're sending to Ukraine, Rand Paul actually came out recently and said, look, I'll sign for the bill, I'll approve it and not block it, but I want spending oversight. And I think they want to make sure that this $40 billion we're going to send to Ukraine doesn't just go to line the pockets of politicians. I mean, there is an election coming. What we can do for China now and the other countries might help for funding in the future for this political run that we're going to see in 2024. All right, next slide. So let's talk about some of the meats. The statistics show that the total amount of lamb and mutton produced in the United States from 2000 to 2022 is around 228 million pounds of lamb and mutton were produced in 2001. Lamb and mutton produced has generally decreased then and is forecast to be around 135 million pounds in 2022. So we're looking at almost half the amount of mutton and lamb is produced now, which is interesting. We're going to see this in the markets. If you think when the beef goes slim that we're going to turn to lamb, we're not. There's a decrease in that.
I wonder why.
It's for the same reasons we researched earlier. Alfalfa is down. COVID hiring and keeping employers is down.
I see. We didn't really talk about the COVID thing.
Government restrictions, policy changes, all these are playing a role. Federal government buying up land, Bill Gates buying up farmland, all these are playing into mutton and lamb production. It's not counting recalls. There's a huge amount of recalls going on in the beef and chicken departments right now across the U.S.
And why is that?
Because they're finding salmonella.
Okay.
In the processing. And
why so much?
Well, that's a good question. It could be down to, we're hiring more people who aren't experienced. It could be bad practices, or kind of a conspiracy shot is that the federal government wants to shut these places down.
Well, see, I was wondering about the swine flu, because I heard that there was a bird flu and a swine flu that was going around, and that they've had to cull millions of chickens. And my question is the same thing they did with the COVID lockdowns, where they shut down the entire planet. What happens if the governments that be, someone tells us like, hey man, there's this bird flu, they call it COVID 2.0, and like we got to kill all the chickens or all the pigs or whatever animal it is, right? But if you take out any one of those pieces of the food chain, like, everything's going to collapse. Imagine KFC if there's no chicken. What are they going to sell?
Now, we've looked at our food pyramid. We know that milk is a part of the diet, which goes to cheese, and yogurts are produced from milk. So 0.7% is a small number, but when you look at how many pounds it is total of milk, it's a huge factor. And this is this was reported in March. Orange production is down 3% since February. Let's see, between 21 and 22 season, there was 3.78 million tons, down 3% from previous forecasts and down 15% from 2021 final utilization. So our orange production is down 15% from the following year, 3% down from the forecast they expected to hit this year. So we're talking apples, bananas, and oranges are going to not be on our shelves in there. This is part of the shortage and the food crisis shortage. And this isn't from Ukraine. This has nothing to do with Ukraine. This is policy issues and weather conditions we're dealing with.
Well, and people don't think about it, but it's like also, orange juice and apple juice and apple sauce and all the things that you use oranges and apples for.
And the packaging.
Yeah.
I mean, there's several different aspects to it that's going to really increase the final buy. Now, to pop over to Canada, they actually have a lot of field crop areas. Report finds that the producers intend to seed 7% fewer peas than last year. Now, I did a little research on this, and from what I understand is they change what they seed each year so that they can get more nitrogen in the soil. Some plants put nitrogen in the soil, which helps grow other plants the next year. It's crop rotation. But a lot of them are worried that because of the drought conditions, they're not going to be able to grow the peas, so they're actually sticking to more durable planting. So we're going to see less peas in the market this year as well. Also, let's pop over to rice, another major food group in the food pyramid. U.S. rice growers in March indicated that they would plant 2.45 million acres of rice, down 3% from a year earlier. Growers indicate weaker planting for both long grain and combined medium and short grain rice. The medium and short grain planting showing the largest drop. So we're going to see a rice downtrend of about 3% overall, and that's not specific to the medium and short grain, which is more. So we're going to see less rice on the shelves as well. Now, the main supplier, this is kind of jump back to the bananas. The main supplier of bananas in the U.S. are Guatemala, Ecuador, Costa Rica, Colombia, and Honduras. These top 5 countries ship an estimated of 3.9 MMTs of fresh bananas to the United States, accounting for 94% of the total banana imports. The slide's a little bit out of order, but it still hits true. We're looking at the majority of our bananas coming from countries who are suffering greatly right now. Rice is going to go down, bananas, oranges, lamb.
Oh, are they, are those countries going through a drought, or what's their issue?
They're suffering from diseases. They have COVID-related hiring problems, policies. There's several aspects. Go ahead, Marco.
What about the fertilizer drought?
Oh,
Apparently, there's a shortage of fertilizers, like globally.
Oh, I've heard that.
You know, back in the day, we just used manure as fertilizer, and that used to seem to work out pretty good for, you know, my grandparents. But nowadays, they're using all these synthetic products, and there's a shortage of them, which seems rather convenient at a time where there's famine, drought, and food shortages, you know.
Well, right, and you know, they can always pivot any kind of problems we have, especially with bananas, on climate change. And you know, that might be an aspect. For instance, the bananas themselves, it says imports of bananas in the U.S. are short due to the chillier temperatures experienced in multiple countries. Since the beginning of the year, we've had shortage of banana supplies. We've been experiencing colder weather. That means that there's no grade in the fruit, and the harvest has been delayed, says Jose Hernandez of McAllen. So they're actually having less bananas because of the cooler weather in these countries, as well as the diseases that are following and the COVID hiring problems. So bananas is definitely something to keep an eye on.
But when I heard that you know, food shortages because the temperatures are too low, you know, I heard AOC that say that the world was going to burn in 12 years, and that was like, what, 8 years ago that she said that?
Right. In 1 minute.
So, me hearing that the planet's getting colder, like, I don't know, that was just something that caught my attention.
Yeah, that is weird. It's like no matter what, it's weather problems. Like either we're going to burn to death or we're cooling, but either way, it's the same problem as the way they play it. Another interesting thing on the food pyramid is our potato output is down 2%. This is in November 17th of 2021. Potato area harvested at least 942,000 acres is up 3% from the previous year, while the yield forecast at 437 CWTs per acre is down 23 CWTs from last year's yield. So we're actually seeing about a 3% drop in 2021, and it's actually going faster in 2022. So there's not going to be many potatoes. Plus, as the intro stated, if you actually look through some of our introduction, you will see that 2 potato factories and distribution centers have been burned to the ground. Total losses. The USDA forecast winter wheat production down in 2022. U.S. farmers are expected to produce 1.17 billion bushels of winter wheat this year, according to the crop production report released by the USDA's National Agricultural Statistics Services. So what are we looking at? We're looking at about down 2.3 bushels from last year's average of 50.2 bushels per acre. Hard red winter production forecast of 590 million bushels is down 21% from last year. Soft red winter at 354 million bushels is expected to decrease by 2% from 2021. White winter, 230 million bushels is up 38% from last year. Of the white winter production, 15.7 million bushels of hard white and 214 million bushels of soft white. So we're looking at a slight decline in some of our wheat, a slight uptick in some of them, and so I think, you know, our wheat production is going to affect our bread output. It's going to affect cereal,
like oatmeal and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Any kind of breads we produce, sweet breads, we're going to see that decline in 2022.
Are oats in the wheat category?
Yeah, I would believe so. Yes. Let's pop to our next slide. Now, this is where it starts to get interesting. So one of the major food groups is fish. Okay, we have beef, we have our chicken, we have our fish, we have our lamb. Now, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau addressed this controversial fishing farm practice in 2019 mandate letter, directing the former Ministry of Fisheries and Oceans of the Canadian Coast Guard, Bernard Jordan, to transition away from open net fishing farms by 2025. In response, in December of 2020, Minister Jordan decided not to renew open net pen fish farm permits in British Columbia Discovery Islands beyond June 30th, 2022. Now, what's interesting about this is these are major producers. We import around 88% of our fish from Canada. A lot of our salmon, our crab, and lobsters. And because they're not going to renew these permits to these fisheries, we're going to see an impact in our local markets.
Why are they wanting to end it, though?
The reason they're using is that when you do these open net fisheries, that it actually causes lice, fish lice, to transition to the wild population, and it's hurting the wild population of fish.
Okay.
Right now, Canada's top 3 fish and seafood exports to the United States: lobster, crab, salmon, and other. So they make a large amount of money. 1.64 billion in crab, 1.02 billion in salmon. So we have about 78% of Canada's total fish and seafood exports are to the U.S. This will be a major impact in the food shortage. And like I said, very seldom does it have anything to do besides policy decisions. They want us to feel the suffer. They want us to be hungry, and this is some of the tactics they're using. I love a good lobster and salmon. I don't know about you guys and gals. I think this is kind of breathtaking and interesting because I didn't realize a lot of our seafood came from Canada. Something to think about.
Yeah.
The U.S. receives about 88% of our long line swordfish, 66% of our Mantoboa whitefish, 71% of our open net farmed Atlantic salmon. So we're looking at that 71% of our open net farmed Atlantic salmon. After June 30th of 2022, their permits are going to be declined. And 59% of our Atlantic cod actually come from Canada. Pretty interesting.
I'm wondering, with all these statistics, they seem pretty high as far as the seafood imports to the U.S. So my question is, what happens when countries start nationalizing their food supplies, because there's shortages everywhere? So currently we can import stuff from other countries, but if your country is starving, I don't see the people of America, I don't see the people of America being happy exporting food out to a different country when we're starving. So I assume other countries would, be self-preservationists and come to the same conclusion and figure like, hey, we should treat our own people before we send the food out.
Yeah.
I think that's a great point. I think that that might be a play for why they nationalize. In the U.S., they might use these shortages as a reason to fully control the food supply. It's in their wheelhouse of control to do things like that. It would be something to worry about and consider in the future, that they will use the food crisis as a way to take charge completely. And then we might see the bug production and subsidies of where they want us to eat insects instead of these unsustainable, climate destroying food sources. So that's a great point, Marco. And let's go to the next slide here. We'll keep going. So the next slide is pretty interesting too, and this touches on the points you were making earlier, Marco. More than 24 million birds have been killed in the last 2 months in an effort to contain outbreaks. You might not know this, but there is a bird flu that's been going on since 2015, when producers, another one happened in 2015 when producers killed more than 50 million chickens and turkeys. So what we're looking at right now is an egg-laying facility in Iowa that killed 5.3 million chickens and fired 200 plus employees. This is something you were touching on earlier, Marco, which I think is a valid point for our produce department in the food pyramid.
I mean, it's just concerning between the numbers and the back to the problem reaction solution scenario. In order, like, when people are hungry, they want food, but in order to make you hungry, you don't have to have. They need to take the food away from you. So, when I read these articles and see these numbers, I see it as very concerning.
I do as well. I mean, in Iowa, just recently, the bird flu infected 2 or more farms in Iowa, forcing the killing of 5.3 million hens and 88,000 turkeys, officials said Friday. So when you put those kind of numbers into the what that's going to show on the market, it's going to be shortages. So not only are we being attacked by weather, we're being attacked by policy, we're being attacked by aluminum shortages, and also from this bird flu that's going around that's not talked about too much.
Well, let me ask this. Can people catch this bird flu?
I believe there's been one or two cases where people have gotten sick from this, but absolutely.
Yeah, that's something to look into.
The research I've done, it's a lot of wild birds that have it, and they are able to get into the food supply of these farms, and either through fecal or tracked in, it actually infects the chickens, and they have no choice. It's a public health problem because people can catch it. They have no choice but to slaughter them. It's an interesting thing. This happened in April 28th of 2022. They actually caught a little bit of heat from PETA over this because of how they killed the chickens. They basically turned, I believe, the heaters on high and roasted them in the facility. Kind of cruel, but when you think about the health effects that it could have on people, I think it was important to do. And it just shows that these bird flus and these things that are coming from who knows where are actually affecting our food supply.
Well, see, I'm concerned because you can't trust the statistics that come from the CDC or the FDA. Like, you can't trust any of these statistics. So we're not even sure if all of those birds were infected. Like, were they giving them the same PCR test where you could test a rock or a goat and it would tell you the rock had COVID? Like, how accurate are these tests? And is this a bigger plan to clamp down on the food supply in order to raise prices to make more profit, lower the food supply, crunch the population? Because once you can't readily buy food, people are going to think more about having kids, because that's everyone that I know that's a parent, their worst nightmare is not being able to feed their children. Right.
It could be used as a metric to psychologically put people in a state of mind that having kids isn't viable by limiting the food supply. And also introducing scalability factors with, like, bugs, insects eating bugs, to subsidize this. The bird flu, this is a more recent, this is May 6th of 2022. The bird flu kills 37 million birds in the U.S. It was just detected in Washington State backyard flock. So in Washington, there was a small flock, I believe the story said about 50 birds, and a few of them tested positive, and they killed the whole flock when this happens. To kind of touch on what you were saying, if 1 or 2 birds test positive, they will kill the entire flock because they're contaminated. One of the farmers said that he saw a crow land in his produce or poultry farm, and over the next 2 or 3 days that the chickens were dropping left and right. So it came in through a crow who was infected with the avian bird flu. He passed it on to the livestock, and thus we have 5.3 million killed.
Well, here's my question: is how do the birds get the flu to begin with? How does the first bird get the flu?
And that's a great question, and I don't think anybody has that answer. And I will say this: what's interesting about a crow having this is that a crow is a very smart bird. Out of all the birds, the crows are one of the most intelligent ones. They can get into anything. They actually have a few videos online of showing birds solving problems to get food. So for a crow to have been infected with this, he is going to be able to get into the poultry feed, figure out a way to get in there, and that's when the infection happens. So it's interesting to me that a crow itself had the disease. If it was a dumber bird, he might not be able to get into the facility and spread the disease, but with it being a crow, they're super intelligent. Something definitely to consider. What the future is with our poultry and turkey. We're going to see shortages because of this virus. Another story that's trending right now, and this is one that you're actually seeing reported, is that baby formula shortage worsened. 40% of popular brands sold at some stores are limited to purchases. Right now across the U.S., because of Similac recalls, there was a couple of children killed from it. Also, shipping issues, COVID supplies. We are seeing a 40% drop in baby formula. We actually saw Biden address this recently in a address to us, the citizens, where he basically said he's on top of it. He's going to look into it, which to me feels like another way to nationalize the food supply, to kind of touch on the point you made earlier, Marco, that we might actually see a nationalization of our food chain to protect us. So
my understanding is that there's 3 or 4 major manufacturers that produce baby formula, and apparently some of the main product lines get manufactured at the same plant. Apparently they had an issue where they had equipment that was out of spec. It had grooves and stuff, trenches cut into the machinery that weren't supposed to be there. And then apparently they're supposed to clean out all the machinery. I don't know how often they do it. I don't work at the plant, so they were supposed to clean it with chemicals. Well, apparently these machines weren't operating to efficiency, and they started growing bacteria. They knew there was bacteria that was growing on these machines, and instead of them cleaning them properly, fixing it, buying a new machine, those were 3 good options right there. That just off the top of my head. Instead of doing any of that, they were like, "Hey, what hour did you catch a bad batch?" They're like, "Okay, so from 1 o'clock in the morning to 6 in the morning, get all those batches, and we'll throw that away, and everything else will come off the line since yesterday. Run that shit, sell it." And I think that's diabolical. And as far as I know, they've murdered 2 babies, and I believe other babies were hospitalized that were directly linked to that outbreak from that factory. When bacteria settles there, they get something called a microfilm around them. So if you don't clean it after every run or every shift, when this biofilm builds up around the bacteria, it is impossible, almost impossible, without special cleaning chemicals to get it out. So what happens is this biofilm builds up, the bacteria produces, and pieces of it break off sporadically. So I think what you're saying sounds absolutely correct. They didn't clean the machines, the biofilm was produced, and even though they moved some of the stock out, it didn't stop the chemicals from spreading, or the bacteria from spreading periodically into the Ensure and Similac. Mainly Similac is the one that I believe had the biggest recall. And I think the only solution to this, because everybody wants a solution, is from what I can tell, is going to be breastfeeding. We're going to have to go back to our roots, to how we used to do things, and that's the only way you're going to, at least in some sense, have that security with what you're giving your children. Yeah, I mean, it's terrifying. Like, I don't have any kids, but I couldn't even imagine being one of those parents.
Yeah, you can use breast milk. You can also go back to the old school recipe with the evaporated milk and the Karo syrup, and I think it's baby cereal. You can make a formula out of that. That's what our parents drank, and they're fine. They survived
Well, that's right. But, in the same sense with our wheat shortage, how viable is that going to be?
Yeah, but those are things you can stock up on.
Oh, that's true. Maybe the best solution is to stock up on things to produce a homemade formula.
Just in case.
Resort to breastfeeding as much as possible.
Yeah, you can breastfeed, and you can also buy breast milk.
That's a good point. I think that's going to be a safer metric because it's so easy when you have children, they're little, to be able to make the formula right there. You basically mix it in a clean bottle, you warm it up, and you're pretty much good to go.
And then I think from what I read too, babies can also drink goat milk.
Goat milk, right? And that's, I think, primarily used now for like sensitive stomach babies. Right. That can't drink the formula.
So there are some alternatives, but you just have to think about it and prepare yourself.
So since I don't have any kids, I can't really add to the baby formula topic at the moment. But my concern is having it being a monopoly. It's centralized. If you look at the major manufacturers, their parent companies are all tied together, right?
Right.
So if you look at all the manufacturers of baby formulas throughout the country, and even if we have 9 of them, if we have 9 manufacturers of baby formula and they have 3 parent companies and they're all subsidiaries of each other, and one of them has these malpractices, because these people at that plant knew. They've had internal audits where they caught bad formula, right. And they knew that the health standards weren't up to par.
Right.
And I don't know if they paid off the FDA or what they did, but they were able to bring that shit to market and kill someone.
Right. And how despicable is that? You have a freshly born baby, you're just getting into the parenthood, and then some kind of tragedy happens like this from a company that you're supposed to trust.
It's really sad.
It is. And some of this might be due to the baby boomer generation retiring and the new workforce that replacing them not having the experience and the honestly the drive to make a perfect product.
The character.
Right. I think that might be an issue as well. Now, when we kind of jump over to the psychological side of the food shortage, they want us scared. An example of this is food stamps, or the COVID food stamp benefits actually expired in April. So a lot of places are going to see $100 to $400 less a month on their EBT benefits. Now, with inflation rates already high, we are going to see people really struggle to just purchase these foods. And this is of February 23rd of 2022. Psychologically speaking, this is going to impact a lot of people where they're buying less and they're going to feel hungrier because they're not being given that EBT benefit. I think that's something that is going to affect a lot of households. Not only are we seeing shortages, which is going to raise the price, the buying power of government benefits is going to decline as well.
And when you don't have EBT, you see how expensive the food really is.
Right.
I mean, it is very expensive.
Inflation alone is like 8 to 15% on different goods, and now you take away that $100 to $300 a month from people, and that's a lot more out of the pocket that they probably not going to be able to afford.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I don't know if y'all have realized, companies have started to put less portions in their packaging, so they'll give you the same size box for cereal, but it's 2 ounces less than what it was when you used to buy it, but it's more expensive.
Right.
Bags of chips. So, it doesn't matter what. Dude, when I was a kid, you used to be able to get a fucking candy bar for 50 cents.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a big candy bar.
I got a Coca-Cola for a nickel. When I was a kid, you get a candy bar for 50 cents. Dude, I go to the store now, I see $3.50 for a Reese's. And I don't want it.
Yeah, it's insane.
And the proportion's smaller. The Reese's are smaller. The Cokes are smaller.
Everything.
Yeah, and they cost more, which is absurd. It's the consumer eating the inflation.
Exactly.
Very interesting. So that brings us back around to our food tree, our pyramid. If you look at any item on here, on this pyramid, you're going to see that there is a decline in production. There is for several reasons, sometimes policy, sometimes weather, packaging issues, and I think the consumers are going to eat a lot of this, but in my opinion, I think a lot of this produce, this opportunity for scarcity is going to be picked up by China. I think China is more than ready to sell us something and make money, and this is one aspect that we're going to see, and I think this is led by the Biden administration. They are China friendly. They are not afraid to deal in China, and I think we're going to catch the wrath of it.
I still think that America is the greatest country on the planet, and I believe in American exceptionalism. And our forefathers, you know, they pulled themselves up by their bootstraps through the Great Depression, World War I, World War II, and we're going to have to do the same.
That's right.
I believe that the more self-sufficient that we get, like, if I think of my father and then my grandfather, like, my grandfather knew more than my father knows. My father knows a lot. He's a master mechanic. Like, I ain't been able to break anything he ain't able to fix. But if you look at the generational knowledge that my grandfather had, my dad doesn't know how to can food. I ain't seen him, like, cook much. You know what I mean?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
But my grandparents, dude, they knew how to make wine. They knew how to make liquor. They knew how to can goods. They, you know, liquor's medicine.
Right, that's right. Mm-hmm. It's a disinfectant.
Exactly. So, you know, those were good skills to have, and they were so self-sufficient that if they couldn't go to the store to buy something, it wouldn't have affected them as much as it would affect us nowadays. Because if you think of people that are in our generation, in our age group, most of them have never grown a vegetable or never raised a piece of livestock. They've never had to slaughter a piece of livestock. So, you know, once you get presented with those decisions, like, are you going to feed your family, or is that lamb too cute to kill?
Right.
Until you get hungry, I'm going to eat that lamb.
Right, and I think a lot of people are going to have that hard awakening. As far as solutions go for these problems, I think our best bet is to stock up on everything you can right now. Get as much supply as you can for the following next couple of years. Learn how to can and jar food yourself is going to be beneficiary. Also, or
learn
beneficial.
How to cook and stretch food.
Cook and stretch food. Maybe start at your own little garden, and you know, it might not be successful the first couple of rounds, but try and get better at it over these next few years, because truthfully your life might depend on it. If you have children, you know, be prepared to breastfeed and look into herbs and stuff that can help with breast milk production, you know, so that if you are in a situation and maybe you have trouble producing breast milk, there are alternatives that you can use herbally to help, and recipes like Modest said, you know, create your own. The main thing I can say right now is we are definitely going to see a food shortage. It's not just because of the war in Ukraine. It's policy, it's weather, it's COVID-related consequences that we're actually dealing with, and that you should prepare right now, because if you don't, over the next few years you're going to be hungry and you might find yourself eating bugs. And you know, like I said, we have a t-shirt that we're going to put on sale that says we don't eat bugs, we eat politicians, because these guys have got to get their act together. Biden, from what I've seen, is an embarrassment. And we're too worried about what's happening with Elon Musk or Johnny Depp to actually step back and realize that over these next few years we might be hungry. Our grocery stores might look different, and made by America or Latin America might be a thing of the past. It might all be made by China. I just want to thank my guests for joining me today, Modest and Marco Polo. Thank you guys for joining me on this show. This is a winner. I think we're going to do a lot of good for helping people. Do you guys have any final thoughts before we end the show?
I do. For anyone out there that thinks that you will never eat a bug, look at Taiwan. That country, like, they used to fish, produce their own meat. They made it a cultural thing. Just like I hear black people say that they eat chitlins because it's a cultural thing. I would never eat intestines. I don't care what animal it come from. I don't care how good you clean it. I just don't want to eat intestines. Mm-hmm. But I have family that tells me like that's good eating. I don't believe that shit. I don't even want to try it. I don't want to smell it. I don't want to be in the house when you cook it. But it's a tradition for them. So when you look at Taiwan, they eat chocolate covered ants. They eat scorpions, tarantulas. They eat fermented chicken eggs that have live embryos in them, and they think it's aphrodisiac. So surprised what people will eat. Whatever the parents give the kid is what they're going to eat. So if you think that you will never eat bugs, if you think your family will never eat bugs, open up your mind to the rest of the world and see how they've already done this in other places. And they're telling you they're going to do it to you now. And open up your eyes and see what's coming.
Absolutely.
My final thought is I want a t-shirt that says soy boys eat bugs.
All right, well, we will definitely have that t-shirt also, because soy boys do eat bugs, don't they?
Yeah.
When the soy runs out, they still need that protein, don't they?
Hey, dude, I want the first minute shirt.
Okay. All right.
I want the original one.
All right. That sounds wonderful. Well, guys, thank you for joining us on the Mr. Nice Guy Show. And I hope this was beneficial to show you guys that the food shortage is real. It's not just about burning food processing plants. It is a real thing that's happening based on policy, weather, and other things that fall down from the federal government and others. China wants to be our #1 producer of food in the world, and they're coming for us. So you better be ready, guys, if you don't want to end up eating bugs. Thank you for joining us, and y'all have a great night.